Hey guys, Happy New Year. My name is Farik and I'm a game developer. Prince of Persia The Lost Crown is closing in on its release date and I figured the content on this channel will stay on Prince of Persia until I finish up all of my content ideas on the series while I'm at it. And a few days ago I decided to play Sands of Time for the first time, with an asterisk. Many years ago I played the game for less than 10 or 5 minutes. I was expecting a combat system like Warrior Within and for some reason the game was looking like this. But now I managed to run it correctly and with determination to go through this game. Buckle up, we're starting. So Jordan Mechner many years ago created the original yada yada yada. If you want to know the full story, just Google Jordan Mechner. I'm here to talk about the Sands of Time. The Sands of Time, when it was released, it was revolutionary. The technical achievements, storytelling, platforming, the acrobatics, the time mechanics, all of them were groundbreaking at the time. And the game knows it as well. We begin the game with the prince and the king himself on an attack to a Maharaja in India. Vizier is betraying the ruler in the city. Vizier has promised Shahraman, the father to the prince, of a vault of great treasures. And Prince goes to claim some of the treasures in the vault and the game begins. And on the first room the game showcases its groundbreaking ideas of wall running by slow-mo. I remember seeing the Prince wall running in Warrior Within and my jaws were on the floor. But now considering the gaming landscape, it's just alright. After that we see some very simple platforming and the camera work was also revolutionary. This is but a simple jump. And other games would just follow the Prince. But here, this camera angle proves the length they went to for making this a very cinematic experience. This camera work is done all over the game, to good effect and bad. I'll talk about it later though. First instance of combat happens, which is one of the points that made me not play the game years ago. I'm gonna talk about combat later, but when the combat ends, they do this very slow-mo shot of Prince sheathing his sword, which is good for the first time. The second time is okay. The third time and so on. After this, Prince narrates more story during gameplay. What his intentions are, how he's thinking, which is something I wish more games would do instead of cinematics and cutscenes and dialogue wheels. Makes the gameplay and story actually connected. One of the very positive aspects of this game is actually that, which still holds. More on that later. Also during this, he talks about Khosrow and Rostam, which are legends from Shahnameh. That brings me to one personal gripe with this game. With a name like Prince of Persia and showing they went in on the story and the legends, why this game happens in India. My hopes were always that this series were based on something from Shahnameh instead of 1001 Nights, or more commonly known as Arabian Nights. But personal gripes aside, they nailed the Arabian Nights influence. In Arabian Nights, there's a king who would take wives and they executed them the day after because his first wife betrayed him. And the story is about one of those wives that starts to tell the stories for the king. And by the power of stories and cliffhangers, the wife gets a pardon. And in those stories are other narrators which tell another story. And this game seems like one of those stories exactly. Anyway, getting back to the game, we see one of the flaws of Prince, which is being just naive and seeking honor and glory. And the next platforming sections made me realize how Forgotten Sands really tried to imitate this game. Just an observation. After more platforming, we get introduced to very simple obstacle courses, which will be expanded on later in the game. More platforming and our prince finds the Dagger of Time. This artifact has the ability to manipulate time, most importantly the ability to rewind time, which is one of the coolest abilities in gaming that I wish we could see more of. Now, this was only the game intro. Excluding the combat, the game nails it in every possible way. Whatever it targets, it achieves. And the 3D models and textures, while they show the age of the game, they still look decent. But I digress. A very good introductions for the players of what they're in for in this game. Bombastic intro. But let's actually do this. The cinematic that plays right after that is Prince showing the dagger to his father and Vizier is there. In this cinematic we understand multiple things, how childish the prince is. Vizier is clearly a dick and it's very obvious he wants to have the dagger and the hourglass for himself. And I saw this, found myself saying out loud how cartoonish this thing is. And I finally, fully understand the backlash of Warrior Within because of the direction. And we see Farah. She is taken as a slave and we go to Azad. Shahraman wants to gift the Hourglass of Time to the Sultan there. We immediately go there and Vizier doesn't take a second to reveal what a dick he is. He convinces Shahraman to release the Sands of Time and points the prince to open it with the Dagger of Time. Except Farah, that the game later hints has limited knowledge of what the sands are capable of, cries out don't do it. Everyone else is just watching and waiting for the sands to be released. The sands get released, people turn into monsters except 3 people, Vizier, Prince, and Farah, protected by artifacts of time that they have. And some people that I am showing right now. Vizier tries to be helpful while claiming that the prince had done something extremely wrong, and to undo it he needs a dagger. The prince doesn't trust him and flees. We encounter some sand creatures and we get to these checkpoints, which are tied to the story as well. These give you visions of what happens in the future in the game. Well, you could say they uploaded their own walkthrough of the game inside the game, but I hardly noticed platforming and stuff getting spoiled, and there are only 2 cases. I think they actually done this for helping the player. And the prince acknowledges this, something that's important for later as well. More acrobatics really shows what it's about. It's not about complex control of prince. The controls are actually very simple. You have your jump and you have your special action button, which is wall running, spinning on bars. While this might seem boring, but figuring out the correct path and going through the obstacles with correct timing still feels satisfying. Our prince tries to find Pharaoh, which was not consumed by the sands, and does it. They struck a very uneasy alliance, Farah demanding the dagger of time and accusing the prince of causing all this. Then some scarabs attack and interrupt them. Farah escapes through a crack in the wall and on with the game again. The next room shows more insights on what the game has done for the genre as well. During wall running you can jump, and in some places you're required to jump at a precise moment. Well, in this room, the wall running and jumping onto pillars is marked by this conveniently placed shadow on the wall. This trick is actually genius. I've seen this in Darksiders where you can wall run. It seems like its scratch is not natural, and not to mention how much quality control went into this game that makes the developers be aware of these things. Next room is the first puzzle. Not really a puzzle. There's this soldier that somehow survives the sands and is guiding you through this puzzle. You have 2 of these things which controls the platform that you stand on, either its rotation or which level it is on. And you have to pick up these tubes thingies or whatever they are and put them in order to get past this section. The reward, triggering the defense system of the palace, which only acts as an obstacle for Prince and nothing else, and Prince acknowledging it is really funny.
By setting in motion such a deadly system of traps, which seemed in truth more likely to claim my life than that of an invader that was not.
Anyway, one new type of obstacle is these things. Now, if you have played later titles, you would expect that if you walk on them with a slight delay, they would pump out spikes, but not on this game. They are immediately triggered. Rolling doesn't work. You have to walk slowly over them if you don't want to get trapped. And this is probably the most annoying thing about the obstacles in this game. This breaks the pace of these courses. Longer courses would suffer from these. This gives time to the player and not in a good way. Later titles you might need to stop and evaluate your timing on when to start, but here you just walk very slowly. The issue is they use it even more. Sometimes you're expected to wall run after these, which would break the trust of controls. You're not required to slow walk anywhere else in this game. It expects you to combine this in a weird way, and these doesn't even have a ground check on the prince. If you're over them, even if you're not touching them, they get activated, which is extremely weird. This game has secret collectibles that are not so secret. You just have to deviate from the main path to find them, and they upgrade your life. But this game is extra. One of these secrets are on your way, and Farah is with you at the time. Prince tells Farah to come with him. She declines, and when he comes back, this happens.
How long have I
Gone? What are you talking about?
Never mind.
This is a very minor thing, but I appreciate the effort that went into this small thing. And I think these areas is what inspired the magic in Forgotten Sands. After that, we come back to the starting room to fight Sharma, now a sand creature. And I guess this is the time that I should talk about the combat. Well, the first thing that I have to say about combat is that it's horse shit. It's insultingly bad, especially when you see what they done in Warrior Within and the Two Thrones. There is no combos in this game. You just attack with your sword and that's it. You have a block and there's a counter system in this game which is unusable. If it's not frame perfect, either you fail or you trigger this slow recovery animation that leaves you vulnerable. And no, I haven't forgotten about the acrobatic. You can vault over enemies, wall lunge through them, which are not the redeeming quality. It's just the way that it was designed to be played. You have to use these. And divides the combat and enemies into very clear-cut sections on what you have to do and what you shouldn't do. Based on enemies you face, you have to do 3 things. These guys that you should vault over, the other guys that you should wall lunge through them. And the worst offenders of this system, in my experience, is these guys. You can vault over them, but they block the last attack that knocks them down. Wall lunge is useless against them as well, they block it, so the only way for me was to just attack them with the sword until Prince decides to break their guard. This doesn't feel good, it happens randomly, and this made the combat in my experience very boring and very limited in terms of responsiveness. To be fair, the game had a move which I didn't discover, which is vaulting over, and the second attack being the dagger, which consumes them on the spot. That's on me. But did you notice? You have to consume your enemies, there is no destroying them, and only with the dagger. Whatever I told you leaves the enemies on the ground, and you have to go to them, press your dagger button so they would finally stay down for good. Failing to do so results in them getting revived, to full health I assume, which is extremely annoying. I remember seeing enemies on Warrior Within lying on the ground, and you had the option to stab them for a lot of damage. Wow, that was really cool, but here the system is rough and annoying. You'd think I would be done with this, but no. Whenever you consume an enemy, the next one appears, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And this game has this weird thing about the enemies that they have to close their gap with the prince, and they do it in a very weird way. They get teleported. It's like something is pulling them through space, and this leaves you like you just consumed an enemy. But it's always the 4 enemies on your screen and seemingly no progression. And one extremely painful thing about the combat is that the game suddenly betrays you by not telling you and resetting the timer duration on your rewind whenever you consume an enemy, which is extremely baffling. You think that you are left vulnerable with consuming an enemy. So why this is like this? I actually have an elaborate guess on it. No, it's not this throwaway explanation. This video is already long and I think it deserves a video, so subscribe for that. But this just betrays you in your mind. The other thing that you can do is freezing enemies in animation by using your dagger, which takes good care of one of them, but when you try to finish them, it takes this form of long ass animation that actually leaves you vulnerable and enemies will attack you. To make things worse, Farah is with you for most of the combat sessions, and she just makes everything infuriating. Farah should be protected because she might die or she might fall off, which just ends the game. Couple that with the consuming thing resetting your timer, she might die not because you didn't dispatch your enemies, but because you did and one enemy is harassing her. But in other times you realize friendly fire is on and arrows she shoots actually can hit you. You're stuck wondering why you start this channel and playing something that you don't enjoy. But wait, friendly fire is on. Let's take revenge.
What are you trying to do?
Ow!
Sorry. Stop it!
Now you'd think I'd be done with bashing the combat. But no, after all of that and waiting to get back into the acrobatics and puzzles, the game holds you for this slow-mo shot 80% of the time. You dispatch 2 scarabs, and you have to watch this. And now, let's stop on the combat and go through the rest of the game, but the combat still holds. It's always like this. The rest of the game is Farah and Prince trying to get to the hourglass of time. The checkpoints start to become unreliable narratively. There are a few times that Sans tell the Prince that he falls to his death. But conveniently, the prince doesn't address this, but pays attention to the recurring visions of Farah stealing the dagger of time. And in truth, Farah tries to get the dagger as well. This is important, I promise. Later in the game, there are these annoying birds and a combat where you don't have access to any range attacks. You just have to wait, block, and then kill them. One more annoyance is these bats are there to annoy you out of your platforming, just to annoy you. Anyway, we learn that the prince needs to go to horny jail. The world around him is crumbling to sands. Enemies are around him all the time, but he's starting to think about banging Farah.
Way through the moonlit ruins, I began to feel strangely drawn to the girl at my side.
But things get worse. Farah also needs to go to horny jail.
About the story from here next time.
Don't leave me. My love.
Prince ends up in the wrong baths. While there, we get to see these ropes, which are clunky as fuck, and reveal an issue with the game camera that sometimes it's not so clear where you should go, and based on the camera position, which direction of movement you should do on your controller. Later we reach the puzzle with the lights and mirrors, which I wouldn't call a puzzle on this stage. It's very easy to figure out, but satisfying nonetheless for the first time. After that we go into this room, which makes the camera work even more worse. This angle just makes it so hard to make sense of the 3D space that the prince is in, and I had no idea how should I set up these. I just solved them by trial and error. After some time, we reach a room with the hourglass in it. Because of the recurring visions of betrayal and also the reality that it happened, the prince doesn't trust Farah and doesn't go through with the task. Vizier shows up and knocks him out of the park. And Farah is so mad that the prince actually used his brain instead of chasing honor and glory or being horny all the time. Now, the next part is something. A room full of doors that you have to find the combination by trial and error. At first, I thought the hint was the lights in the middle, but the hint is whenever you're in front of the correct door, you hear water sound. Which is kinda annoying. I remember Devil May Cry 4 had a similar puzzle, and even with the game obviously hinting you on how to solve it, I find these very annoying for the player base. In fact, I remember someone on YouTube being extremely annoyed by this puzzle room in Prince of Persia. And we get to this. Which I would say, what the actual fuckery is happening here? I know it's a story, the two main characters, yada yada yada, but they're surrounded by enemies. Prince wakes up and 3 enemies are near him. This makes this sex scene the most illogical in this series. And I'm mad because it makes the other sex scene in Warrior Within the most logical. Like, yeah, we're stuck on a boat, we're horny, let's have sex while remaining fully clothed. Anyway, Farah actually betrays Prince by picking up the dagger, leaving the medallion to him so he wouldn't die because of the sands. There is this excellent puzzle with the lights. It's no longer piss easy, you have to think about how to place some mirrors that you can move. And after that, Prince gets a broken OP sword. It deletes enemies on 1 hit. Anyway, the dagger is removed, and this results in the game shooting itself in the foot, because the rewind is removed. I still don't want to get into this. I think it's the same thing about the combat resetting the timer duration. This is a video on its own. Prince finds Farah, which is in trouble, and that trouble leads to this moment. Farah sacrificing herself. And actually seeing the prince trying to rewind time to save Farah, that was actually neat. Prince goes to the hourglass and triggers Grand Rewind. Everything remains the same and we go back to the night before the attack at the start of the game. But the prince now has Dagger of Time for some reason. He goes to talk with Farah, Vizier shows up, he's supposed to be a boss fight, but he's just another mob that you have to defeat 3 times without any major differences. And that was it, the game ends. And I forgot to mention, there is no other boss fights in the game. Shahraman, that's also another mob that you have to defeat. With the Vizier defeated and Calamity diverted, it's cool. One would say it's satisfying even. But I'd say it's too cute for its own good. Are you telling me a whole bunch of nothing happened? The game makes a very big point of how Prince is responsible for the releasing of the sands. Well, it's clearly the fault of Shahraman for trusting the Vizier and not saying anything during the cinematic. The prince learns not to trust Vizier or anyone who says the right things. The game throws him under the bus for not trusting Farah, while the Sands visions are clearly warning him of betrayal. And then it actually happens. A sacrifice happens but loses its impact when 4 minutes later it's undone. And how the prince grows in this story? By the power of hindsight? Really? Really? I'd argue he degenerates further because he learned to abuse a magical eraser of mistakes. Yes, I said abuse. What would you call this?
That I would believe such nonsense. I said I owe you thanks. You presume too much. Such a fantastic...
That was the story. But I mainly focused on the gameplay, and it was very hard for me to come to a conclusion. Excluding the part where the dagger is removed, the acrobatics and puzzles are top notch, except a few gripes that I have with the camera and one of those trap thingies. Yes, it's slow and simple at times, but at the same time it's methodical and rewards you for good timing, while being extremely satisfying and cinematic. But the combat is driving me insane. I didn't use the time powers a lot, because I've seen some comments around the internet that it's better and smooth than Warrior Within. I really tried to see it, I really tried to interact with it, but it's just boring, irritates me all the time, and can't wait for it to end. So, for the conclusion, I received some extra help. A Prince of Persia game is divided into 3 sections, set by some game director of one of the Prince of Persia titles. I think it was 2008 version. But however, it stands on this game as well. While the 3 sections are not overtaking each other in the sands of time, but giving points based on each section, it still doesn't do justice of how infuriating and boring the combat was. So I make this analogy. Imagine you're in a restaurant. You're eating a meal with 3 key ingredients. 2 of them are great, delicious, even worthy of going to the chef and thank him personally. But the 3rd one leaves a very uncomfortable sour taste in your mouth. It's poisonous and gives you diarrhea. No matter how good were the other 2, you still have diarrhea. And no, the thumbnail was not a clickbait. It doesn't hold for this reason and this reason alone. I don't want to touch this game ever. And I am actually really worried about the Sands of Time remake. If the Sands of Time remake remains like this, I would be infuriated. In one of my videos, I said I actually didn't care about the graphics, and I still don't. As long as it doesn't look like diarrhea, I don't care. But they still have to do something about the combat system. And I have seen some comments regarding Warrior Within combat being annoying. I have no idea what to say but this. Warrior Within had so much more going for his combat. There are a lot of combos. Picking out different weapons with different attributes, different moves based on the offhand weapon you pick up, environmental combat was improved, the grabbing, and all of that. You had so many options. I'd find myself taking different strategies for each encounter. Although it might become annoying on how many encounters are in the game, it's miles better than knowing that this group of enemies are done for good, while Sands of Time just throws you more seemingly endlessly and not making a difference 90% of the time. And while we're on that subject, even though Warrior Within made combat more centric and stayed away from the formula that I mentioned, the 3 ingredients, it's objectively a better game in terms of gameplay. The direction and the tone is subjective. Subscribe if you like this video, and like if you want to see more Prince of Persia related content. I said that really wrong. What are your thoughts? Comment down below if I'm wrong or anything like that. I would like to know. And it's 12:40 a.m. and I have to edit this video and upload it as soon as possible. I'm so tired. So just bye.